Now, the league fixtures were released this morning at 9 o'clock, so that seems like a good place to start. Unlike Newcastle away, Alfie, which is the longest trip of the season and somewhere where we've not had a good record.
Yeah, like you said, I think we were speaking just before we went on air, and you reckon it's been 9 years since you won there?
I think 9 years since we won there 2-0 during the Koeman era.
2-1.
So was it 2-1? Sorry,
yeah.
2-1. So yeah, it's not been a happy hunting ground, but you got to start somewhere.
Look, I think the way I look at it is that you get personally for me as a professional, you get the long journey out of the way first. Obviously, it's a little bit of an ache to get there, but once you're there, it's a decent ground, a decent atmosphere. But I look at it, just get that game out of the way. Whatever happens, happens. And then I actually think the next 4 fixtures are pretty reasonable. Even Man United, sort of Glen alluded to earlier on Twitter. I think Man United at home is a reasonable one. You can. You obviously beat Ipswich. I think Leicester's in there early, Bournemouth as well. So I think you get through that Newcastle one, you probably don't expect to win out of that one. A bit of a sighter, and then you've got some really winnable games. So I think as far as the fixture is concerned, at the end of the day, you're going to play every team twice, obviously. But I think they've got a good run to start, which, given I think where we might be in terms of the fact, it's not going to be easy. We know that, and they're going to be playing a certain way against teams that are a lot better than what they have been doing for the last year. And there's going to be some teething issues. There might be a case where all the transfer business doesn't get done early, and the team's still changing at the start of the season like it was last year. So I think to have those reasonably winnable games at the start, I think it's a bit of a bonus for them.
What were your thoughts on those opening 6 games, Glenn, when you saw them this morning?
I was quite pleased with it, to be honest. I think, as Alfie said, you got a very difficult one first up, and after that, you've got some games you can reasonably, expect to be competitive in. Not that we won't be competitive up at Newcastle, but you know what I mean. What I was dreading is that we were going to get 3 big teams first 3 games, and then the 4th team's at home to Ipswich or something.
Yeah, and
then the pressure's massively on already. With the fixture list of where they've come out in August or September, it's up to us to, it's in our hands to make a good start. There's no games in there, including Newcastle away, where you're thinking already, no, we're not going to get anything from that. Yeah, obviously every game will be difficult. Every game will be a challenge, but we all know there are some games where you're just like thinking, how on earth are we going to get anything out of this? And it's just going to be maybe there'll be a few damage limitation sort of games this season. We've got to accept what we are. We are a newly promoted side, and we all saw how the promoted sides did last season, and it pretty much wasn't very good from start to finish. So I was happy with the start. And if you look down throughout the season, until you get to really May, there's no sort of batches of games where you're thinking, we've got 5 really, really difficult games in a row there. I think as far as we're concerned as a newly promoted club, it's a decent spread of fixtures, and and you've really got to win 1 game a month to stay up. Really, that'll be 10 wins. And if you look at the months individually, there's a very winnable game most months. But obviously, looking at it, we all know how good our predictions were last year. So looking at it from here is very different from when the action actually starts.
It's a good way to break it down, I think. Steve, it's going to be about getting points off those sides who are likely to finish in the bottom half, isn't it, really? We're not going to go to the Etihad and win. We're not going to win at the Emirates, you wouldn't have thought. So there are, as Glenn said, there are some winnable games in those first couple of months.
Yeah, definitely. But the risk you always run is you kind of line up specific games to get specific targets from. And we did that the last time we went up. If you remember, the first 4 games we had were City away, Arsenal away, United at home, and Wigan at home. And we all targeted that Wigan game, second game of the season, and we basically didn't do anything, didn't turn up. So we lost all 4. So we kind of put all our eggs into that basket, and despite playing well against both the Manchester clubs, just didn't kind of quite come out the right side of the result. But it was only once we had that game against Villa where we tore them to pieces in the second half, we kind of realised, okay, yeah, we can do this now. So yeah, it's going to be difficult, but ultimately I think realistically we've got to be looking at those early games just to get something on the board. It doesn't necessarily have to be wins in any or all of them. but just make sure you're kind of getting points on the board early doors. Just settle everybody down, because there's nothing worse than going through like first 5-6 games where you've got maybe 1 point, and all of a sudden everyone's twitching and saying, "Oh, this isn't working. Transfer business hasn't been great because these players aren't gelling immediately." And then all of a sudden the sort of narrative changes somewhat, and the kind of attitude within the club and within the fan base is a very different one to the one that starts the season. So it's important to kind of demonstrate to everybody that you're able to compete. But that doesn't necessarily need to be a case of, right, we've got to win 4 out of the first 5 games. I think it's a kind enough fixture list that we should be expecting something. But by the same token, you've kind of got to temper the expectations somewhere, and realistically, you will pick up some points against the better sides, and hope that those kind of offset anything you make a mess of against the teams around you. Because I mean, ultimately, that was what screwed us over a year ago, was that we dropped far too many points against bottom half teams. We just weren't good enough against teams that were happy to sit back for an hour and then pick us off later in the game. And we've got a kind of that's very much a risk this time around, unless there are some both personnel and probably some slight tweaks to the system, I'd say.
Yeah, it's going to be a big summer. Alfie, I think you were the first person that I saw notice about the Everton away game. I hadn't actually clocked that, but that's their last season at Goodison Park, so that's going to be quite a big occasion.
Yeah, so actually I had a message from Dan Hargreaves, who's a Saints fan and covers Bristol Rovers for the local paper over there. He just pointed out, actually, so it's credit to him, to be fair. It's obviously interesting. I mean, they've been playing at Goodison Park since, 1892 or something like that. And they're going to be finally leaving, going to this brand new swanky stadium, and Saints will be the last team they face in a competitive game, which is going to make it obviously an unbelievable occasion. I think Saints obviously won for the first time there since the 90s last time, under the Lord Nathan Jones, his only win obviously in 8 attempts. So they've broken that hoodoo, but that's going to make it obviously a difficult afternoon. And the thing about that is the last 3 fixtures, I had them up here, we'll just pull them up so my brain is forgotten, but Man City, Everton away and Arsenal was the last 3 fixtures, and there's no point making predictions about May, because we all said that Leeds United Ellen Road would be the biggest game in history, and ended up being a friendly, basically.
Yeah.
But that is 3 really tough games. And if you go into that run of games needing a couple of wins to stay up, or, to get into Europa League or whatever, that's going to be extremely difficult. So I'd like to think that whatever the business they're trying to do is, it's going to be done by April, because this could be a tough end.